Hey, welcome to episode 10 of the War Journal podcast. Today I have my first podcast guest, Brian Michigan. And Brian and we met in 1987, shortly after we graduated boot camp together. And we went on recruiter's assistance together for a little while, and which was probably the first in almost a decade of fun and adventures, of a friendship that's been around 30 years. And we want to talk about our experience as veterans, our experiences in the Marine Corps, in college together, but most importantly, our relationship, how it evolved over time, and how veterans communicate, and how that relationship changes over time, and how our own personal traumas or struggles, how we've relayed those, communicated those in the past. But I want to let Brian introduce himself, and then I have some really fun questions for him, and allow us to go back in time and relive a little history.
Yep. Thanks, Jim. It's always a pleasure. Again, thanks for having me. I'm a little nervous only because I just don't know where you're going to bring this sometimes. We've known each other a long time. This could go any direction, but it'll be fun. It'll be informative. And again, talking about vets and how they communicate with other vets, especially vets that, and obviously we'll get into this, that, they're very quiet. You talk to your buddies and your friends from years and years of experience in the Marine Corps and whatever military service that you were in. There's a lot of pride and a lot of holding back of what you want to talk about to your buddies, because you talk to your buddies about, we go out to drink, we have a great time, but I'm kind of looking forward to talking to you about what vets don't tell other vets in a way, and how that kind of really sort of it's not a good thing. I think in the end we'll talk, we'll say that communication between vets, talking, being open about your experiences only helps. It doesn't hinder. There's too many people that we've known in our careers that aren't here anymore because of it. And I just hope that if this is a way for vets to start talking up to each other, great. Me and you didn't talk about these things at all, and until recently, less maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But anyway, thanks for having me, and I look forward to it.
All right, let's start off on a positive note and have a funny story. So let's talk about the first time we met at Recruiter's Assistance in Bricktown, New Jersey, and let's relive the story about your dad's Cobra. And if you can tell me about that story, I think that really captures us as individuals and our personalities, and kind of sets the tone for the podcast.
Well, we both graduated boot camp. We weren't in the same battalions, but we graduated relatively at the same time. We found ourselves in January of 1987 at Recruiter's Assistance in Brick, New Jersey, and we met. We connected real quick. You were always the one that was like, man, I know I'm going to get in trouble with this guy, but it's fun. Let's do it. So you were always the kind of like the you were the troublemaker. Let's just get it out there right now. But my dad had a Cobra, 1970 Cobra, 4-speed, or on the stick, and this thing was super fast. And anybody knows Jim, you're into fast cars and things. So Jim was salivating over to try to drive this car. Now, if you know my old man, I know your old man. These are not the people that you want to mess their cars up at all. So, of course, I let Jim drive it once, and we're on a road, and he's like, I'm going to pass this car. It's going way too slow. And I think they were doing like 80 and a 45, but we were like, we got to go. So you went to pass him, and I remember this lady's look on her face in that little station wagon coming up at us. And I thought I thought we was going to be done right then and there. Like, but you pulled it off. Somehow you pulled that off. And not that I'm advocating crazy driving, but that's me and Jim's first real experience together as friends, and it's only grown. And oh, by the way, he dropped the muffler on it in that move. I had to bring the car back to my dad's house, who now we had both been in through boot camp, but if you guys know our, my dad and your dad, now we were in boot camp pretty much all of our lives. And so, hey, Dad, the muffler fell off. I don't know how that happened, but it did. But I think we hung it up on a couple hangers and stuff until we got it back. But anyway, that's the story. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
appreciate that. I remember it was on Princeton Ave, and
it was.
I will never forget the look in the
I
lady's face as we went by her doing about 80 miles an hour, and, or the look in
yeah,
the person's face was in the oncoming vehicle. But I think
I
that
still drive
is
on that road. I still drive on that road every day, and I know exactly where it happened every time, and I always think of that moment. And I'm sitting there, and I never pass anybody there ever.
uh, so.
But
I want to ask you, after recruiter's assistance, obviously you went to your unit. I went to recon,
yeah,
and we didn't really see a lot of each other, but we did. And tell me a little about what you did, because you were in Operation Just Because, and
yeah.
some of the
So
things you did.
after recruiter assistance, we both went down to the ITS. They called it ITS back then, Infantry Training School. So that Camp Geiger, I believe it was at the time for everybody. So we were all down at Camp Geiger doing that. And I got actually stationed on an aircraft carrier for 2 years. So I was guarding special ordnance. That's what they call it. So whatever. So I was on an aircraft carrier. I didn't come home for 2 years. So I was stationed overseas for 2 years, went all over to Southeast Asia, which was great. I loved it. Great time. It's now a museum in San Diego, if anybody's interested. So it's nice to go back to a ship where you lived on for 2 years, and it's now a museum. It tells you how old you are, right? Um, then I came back, and I was stationed with Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines. And at the time, they were we were chained. Our 3-6 was rotating back and forth to Panama. Um, Back then, they called it a low intensity conflict, where we were on a daily basis, maybe like once a week, twice a week. We were having excursions with their Panamanian Defense Forces. So it was very political. It was very touch and go, but we would rotate 6 months back and forth. So it was I only had 2 months, 3 months to get prepped up, and I was a corporal at the time. So it was hard for me to kind of prove myself to the Marines that I was going to be leading in, 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines, Keel Company. The guy coming off sea duty, it's tough, right? So I had some great mentors. We went over to Panama, and we guarded the fuel that was a fuel farm we called Arahan Tank Farm. We guarded that fuel tank farm, which supplied all the aviation fuel for Howard Air Force Base, which was right next to Howard. It's just for triple canopy jungle, almost looks like a golf course in sections where the tanks were. And for the last couple of years, I guess we were engaging PDF, and Panamanian Defense Forces would come in and they tried to make us engage them in a way that they could use it for propaganda. So it was a very stressful situation. And then obviously we ended up invading them on December 20th, 1989. And we took out Noriega and whatnot. So it was a very interesting 4 months, because everything happened so quickly. It was like 4 months, and it was just in the jungles and during the Panama invasion, it was in the towns, securing their dignity battalion stations or their PDF stations. So yeah, that was my experience. And then I came home, and I got out, and then, and Desert Storm happened, and I got out, and I tried so hard to get back into my old unit. I ended up joining the reserves, and they stuck me in Norway and Honduras. So, that's what happened. But then again, we met up at Area 2 pool after that. So.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I went to Desert Storm, when I returned, and you'll see there's like this happened a couple times in our relationship, our friendship.
Yeah.
When I returned from Desert Storm, my family didn't show up. I was on a working party in Oslo Beach, and you pulled up on your brown Suzuki Samurai and Jeep and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And we went down to Myrtle Beach for the weekend. And
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, we're gonna skip over that one.
yeah, we'll gloss over that one. But you know, I'll say this: my family didn't show up, and it was for me. I got off the plane, and there's the band, and everybody's cheering. And remember, in 1991, there was yellow ribbons everywhere,
Yeah.
and flags, and it was very patriotic. And not having my family there was for me, it was disheartening, shall we say. And I will say, when you showed up, it really, it was an amazing time for me. How much respect I have for your dad and your family, and they pretty much adopted me, took me in, and so having you there, and then that weekend in Myrtle Beach was obviously a great time. But I always wanted to tell you how much I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um,
No, thanks, Jim. No, I wouldn't have missed it if I knew you were coming home. I somehow I got wind of your unit coming home, and I'm like, I got to be there for him, and so thank you though. But yeah, I know, because I know how I kind of knew how hard that was coming home, because when I came home from Panama, I mean, let's face it, Panama was nothing in compared to the scale of Desert Storm. And most Americans didn't even know we were doing stuff like that. And when I came home, obviously my parents, I didn't give them the heads up, because it was so sudden. All of a sudden they pulled us off the line, and we were, in a civilian plane and flying home. But I remember coming home and then being in a formation, and we were just dismissed like it was any other training day. Go home for 96, and not having somebody there, it's when I needed them. I mean, think about it. When you came back, I mean, mentally, I needed some sort of connection with somebody in my family, and maybe that subconsciously, I knew that you needed that too, and I wouldn't have missed it. I mean, if I was there, I was going to be there. So, but thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brian. So I want to transition a little. So, we remain friends. I stay on active duty. I get out of the Marine Corps, and I come back home to Point Pleasant, where my father lives, and you're in Point Pleasant Beach. And tell me the story about our night in Frankie's Bar and Grill, and how that set our course. I remember when we were sitting there in Frankie's, and we were lifeguarding, and then we were having this philosophical debate about what we're going to do. If you remember, if not, I mean,
Wait,
do you
were we going to
recall?
be stuntmen?
We were sitting at the bar, and we were drinking, and we were loaded, and we flipped a coin. Heads,
Yep,
we go to stuntman school, and tails, we go to college.
yep, yep. And then you ended up going to college. It
Yep.
just happened to. It's weird how a flip of a coin can, designate your life. But yeah, and we ended up going to the same college. And the way that IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which is another kind of interesting story. I mean, kind of segueing into what I think you wanted to really talk about is veterans, talking to veterans. When you come out of the military, especially if you're in the infantry division, I can't speak for you know, any other service or units, but when you're in the infantry and you got 250 guys in your company, 200, 210, whatever it is at the time, and they're your closest buddies, and then one day it's done, it's gone. It's like you come home, and I'm waking up in my old bedroom from 4 years ago, and I'm in the same place I was 4 years ago. And who are those people that you would die for, or you would do anything for? Drop of a hat. What do you need? I'm going to be there. You don't have that anymore. And when we ended up going to IUP, and I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, we kind of separated in IUP a little bit, because you ended up going. We both pledged to fraternity, right? And
We're both
I
in the
think,
Theta
yeah,
Chi fraternity, and we're pledge brothers.
yeah, our first semester at school, 23 years old, uh, pledging a fraternity with a bunch of 18-year-olds that just wanted to kill us. But getting to what my point was this. I think that we wanted that. I think we wanted to be a part of another fraternity, like brotherhood. And I think Theta Chi actually brought that in for us. And you ended up joining the rugby team, so you were very involved with them. I was involved with Theta Chi for a couple of years. Kind of, then I started hanging out with the band, Mark and those guys, and I kind of regressed a little bit. I kind of put all that military stuff behind me. And, started drinking a lot. Started. I don't know why. I guess I know why. It's like I just wanted to like put everything behind me. Started drinking, never did the drugs, never got into that stuff. But just I was drunk a lot. I was drinking a lot, and I don't know. You were too. We hung out a little bit in the IUP, but we didn't hang out a lot. You had your group of friends, and I kind of had mine.
Yeah, I remember. One thing that I'll say is when I left recon, we were obviously pseudo special forces, and I was
Yep.
in my car the next day driving home, and I know exactly what you're saying. Here I was with the group that I trained and went on deployments with, and everything for 4 years, and the next day I'm hanging out at Frankie's drinking with you, which was cool. But
Yeah.
I will tell you, you set the course again,
Yes, I
and
did. I know
you
where you're
come
going
to
with
me with
this.
this brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to go be Marine Corps officers.
Yep.
And so tell me that story on how, pray tell, you came up with that
Yeah.
and how you suckered me into it and then abandoned me.
Yeah. So I didn't abandon you. I failed the hearing test. They weren't going to take me. So which is another story, obviously. I mean, we all. But yeah. So I can't remember if I had joined the reserves yet because a buddy of mine. So let's get back to IAP real fast. And when I was in Panama, a good friend of mine, Dan Schoenfeld, was one of the guys that took me under his wing when I came off sea duty. So it was the other NCOs brought me in and said, "Listen, we got to get you up to speed." So Dave Droster and Dan Schoenfeld, good buddies of mine. Well, Dan lived in Indiana, PA. And I remember we were sitting in a fighting hole at the Airhan tank farm one night, and we're just, we're looking out, and I was telling him like, "Hey, I want to go to college, after this, I think." And he goes, "Go to IUP." I go, "Oh, okay, I'll go to IUP." So I remember getting the application in the mail, sitting in a hole somewhere, and filling out the application in a fighting hole, sent it out, got notified that I got accepted. Then Desert Storm hit. I extended it because I didn't want going in. But I told you, I go, "Jim, we're going to IUP." We flipped the coin. We went to the school. Me and you had never been to that school for one day. We never visited. We never did anything. We showed up like the day before classes, and
But
which
there is one thing I remember. We did do some due diligence on schools because we were choosing between IUP and Slippery Rock and a couple others.
copy that.
And
Yeah,
in Playboy's top 100 party schools, IUP was ranked like seventh or ninth,
I think
and
they still are.
the women to men ratio was 6-1 because it was a nursing school. So we were like no brainer, and that was probably the start of me being very focused on data analytics and forming my decisions. But so tell I remember vividly, I'm sitting in the kitchen
Uh,
of my apartment in IUP, and you come in with some brilliant news, and
Yeah,
let's
we're going to be
talk about
Marine Corps officers. We're going to be Marine Corps officers, and I can't remember if it was Dan Schoenfeld that kind of got me onto that. Again, Dan coming back, or if it was just that me wanting to get back in and being part of it again. So we both went down. We booked the tests. We went through the maps. We did all the physicals, and they washed me out for hearing. And I remember being really, really angry about it. Um, like no waiver, no nothing. Like you're the ones that took my freaking hearing, and you're not going to give me away. It was just not. It wasn't going to happen. So you ended up going. You did the same thing my dad did, PLC program for 2 summers, You were very successful, if I can remember. Got the it was a Commandant's Award or what it was.
Won the Commandant's Trophy as a junior, which was unheard of, and graduated with like a 99.9 GPA.
Yeah, it might have been the land nav that put you over, even though no one knew that you took a taxi on one of them. Apparently, I did hear that story.
Well, there was no Ubers back then, so yeah, I had to taxi it around. But yeah, so basically, you were the one who got me to go back into the Marine Corps as an officer. I had a flight contract, and similar to your situation, I went and took the eye exam, and they said that I didn't have 20/20, and then I had to take another one, and then they thought I had refractive surgery, and then lo and behold, then they're saying, well, now you're too old, and you have to get a waiver. And so my cards were dealt by the Marine Corps, as your cards were dealt by the Marine Corps. But as chance would have it, as I'm walking out of the recruiter's office, the Navy guy's like, "Hey, psst, come on over here." And so I wind up going to, joining the Navy as an officer. I go down to Pensacola, Florida. But before I tell the story, before I went to OCS, remember we had a fun night out, and I'm going to put that picture up on the on the video of. It was a really rough night, and I remember as you were throwing up at the side of my car as I was driving. But those were the experiences we had. I remember we were driving around the circle in '88 when your brother was getting picked up full time to be a police officer, and I threw a beer can out of our car, and it went right into the window of his car. Or the night that you guys were all drunk and I'm drunk, and you're like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Just drive home, and if you get pulled over, just call us and we'll tell them everything." And I got pulled over at the the DWI checkpoint, and I was loaded. And the cop comes up and says, have you been drinking?" And I said, "I'm loaded." And he's like, "What?" And he brings another friend over, and I called you, and they're like, he only lives a mile away, let him go. And as I pulled out of the Dunkin' Donuts, I went over the curb. But these are the things that we
Yeah,
did.
so I'm not sure we should be advocating any of this on a podcast.
I mean, this was a different
Yeah,
era. This was a different time, Brian, and
it
people need
was a
to
different
understand
time. It was a different time. Not a, some things have changed for the better.
that. So anyway, here I am. I go into the Navy. I'm an officer. I go to Pensacola, Florida, and I graduate officer candidate school. And as I said, previously, when you were there for me, when I returned from Desert Storm, once again, you went down. You drove from New Jersey down to Pensacola, Florida, with your brother,
Yep.
and you showed up at my graduation, and really appreciate you being my first salute, and that meant the world to me. Also, it was a great weekend. I didn't party as much, but definitely appreciated you being there for my graduation and being the first salute. I mean, once again, I just
Yeah,
appreciate you.
I wouldn't have, again, I wouldn't have missed that for the world. When you asked me to do it, I'm like, I'm there. When do I have to be there? I jumped in the car. Me and my brother drove through, I don't know, Alabama, South Carolina. We were going to be there for that. And I remember getting looked up and down because now you remember I was out of the Marine Corps, I think, at that time. So I'm wearing my dress blues on a base, and some gunny pulls me into his office, and he starts talking to me about this, that, and the other thing, and I'm sitting there going, I'm like, technically I'm like out of the Marine Corps, but I'm going to be there. I'm going to do this, but yeah. So that was kind of that was fun. It was a good time. I remember they were playing the Marine Corps hymn at your thing, and there was I guess I was the only Marine in there that was in uniform, and I, what do we do when the Marine Corps hymn comes up? You get up, position of attention. I'm like, it started going like, and I'm looking, and I can sense that I'm the only one standing up in that crowd. But that was a good time, and it was my honor to be the first.
Yeah, and so this is kind of like where we started moving apart even more. I mean, now I'm in the Navy, and I'm doing my thing. I'm not sure when it was you got married. It was a little after that. But
1999, I got married, started working as a police officer in 96. So, I mean, I know you were going to, I think there was a transition though between that. You were going to a computer school or something, Chubbs or something like that. And when you ended up getting accepted into the Navy candidate school, I think it was like 95, maybe 96. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah.
but it
So,
was
yeah, I
back.
got married.
Yeah, it
What's
was
that?
at that point you started your career in law enforcement,
Yeah.
and then you shortly after you got married. But I remember I came up to the wedding. I came
Yeah.
back to Point
Yeah.
Pleasant. Went to the wedding, and that was obviously a great time. Uh, Enjoyed it, but at that point, kind of we separated, and I remember the communications. And people have to understand this is a different era. Like social media is not, where it
Mm.
was. You just call people every once in a while. I would come up when I visited my dad and we'd get together for a weekend, go drink some beers. Um, but it was really different. And it's not like modern communication where, you're on Reddits and you're on Facebook and you have chat rooms and, all of this social media and communication. So it was like our relationship kind of, went in our own directions to pursue our careers and our family life. Although I put mine off a lot more than you did on yours. Uh, so then what I want to talk about is like we maintain our friendship and we see each other on holidays and on vacations and things like that. But it really is we move apart. And from your perspective, tell me how from what you thought about that. I have my own views and how that relates to you with other veterans and other guys you served with.
Yeah, I'll go back to two guys that took me under their wing, Dan Schoenfeld and Dave Drostra again. We all at that time we were young. We were all out of the Marine Corps. We were starting I guess, our real careers. And we weren't not like you. We were not career military. We were guys that did the 4.5. And we were out doing careers. So at that point, it's like it's another chapter in your life. Maybe it's like you have that Marine Corps chapter, and then you have that chapter where I'm a cop for 22 years. I'm starting, and then that overrides with getting married and having kids and being involved in that. So not that's not just veterans. That happens to like the best of friends from anything. But you know, veterans, I think it's a little, your bond is so strong. It's tough when that happens, but it's great. And I think you brought up social media. I think social media is a positive thing only for that, because that's the way nowadays, that's how you reconnect with some guys. Like, I mean, I reconnected with a couple guys from my old units that I never, thought I would ever see again or talk to again. So social media is good in that way. It's got a lot of bad, things as well, but social media is actually good. Me and you have always been we've always had contact with each other. So, when we drifted apart, it didn't matter. If you called me tomorrow, I'd be like, hey, Jim, what's going on? It could be 2 years since I talked to you. I'm getting back on the phone and talking to you like I talked to you yesterday. And I think veterans, again, I'm speaking for veterans. I think veterans are the same way. If a buddy of mine that I haven't talked to in 30 years called me right now, I would be like, hey man, I'd be calling him the same dumb shit I called him when I was on his unit. It would be like it was yesterday, right? And like there's guys that you would drop the hat and you would be out the door if they needed you. So I think that's unique about vets. When you've been in situations that we've been in with your brothers, really, just because they're gone and you haven't talked to them in years doesn't mean that, if you saw them or they reached out to you or you reached out to them, that it wouldn't be the same exact thing as it was 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years
I
ago.
agree. No, I agree. So let me ask you another question. I want to move the podcast in a different direction. So we both have our military careers. I do my 3 tours in Afghanistan, my
Yeah.
deployments, Desert Storm, and all of a sudden, I'm married, I have 3 children, and I go through a very traumatic experience, through the divorce and custody thing that I'm going through, and we immediately kind of reconnect. And that was because number one, you were checking in on me. almost like a buddy check. And I appreciate that. And, I was in such a dark place, and I think you knew that. And your calls were, you know, hey, I'm going to make sure Jim's not going to off himself,
Yeah, no, I said that. I said, Jim, are you okay? And I'm like, listen, that you had me scared for a while. And I think obviously maybe I was overreacting, but but again, you're my buddy, like any other vet, that's why communication is so important. I mean, it's the number one thing.
Yeah. So you have, and tell me about, you've experienced this, I've experienced this, but you have it more firsthand where you've lost friends due to suicide. And
Mhm.
if you tell me a little about that, and obviously
Yeah.
you're concerned for me, doing something foolish or, offing myself, which, I think you know me very well. I'm going to go kill everybody else before I kill myself. But talk to me about those experiences you had
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
those events.
So I guess the first one was when we came back from Panama after the invasion. We got a 96. I think we talked about it. There was nobody there for you. They gave us a 96-hour pass. I jumped in my Suzuki Samurai, and and I drove home. Surprised my parents. I mean, no one knew I was coming home. It wasn't like, hey, I'm not going to text you. I didn't even call. I just jumped in. I went home, and it was a 96-hour pass. Um, when I got back, we had a formation, but everybody was supposed to meet at the chapel at Camp Geiger, which was strange. We were like, okay, that's weird. So we all got in the chapel, and um, actually my second lieutenant, my platoon, was the one that came up, Lieutenant Chisani, and informed us that that one of our guys had committed suicide when he went home. Now, again, Danny, he he's actually the one that started me to want to play guitar because he brought his guitar to Panama. They let him bring it, so he was like all his equipment and one guitar. So because when we were at Rodman Naval Base, we'd have like maybe a day to just get all our gear back and stuff, and we were back in the bush. But he would just play the guitar down there. I was like, Danny, he was a good dude. I mean, he was a good Marine. He was a good man. And when he didn't come back, that kind of I had no idea, you know, and it kind of hit me. I'm like, wow. I'm like, I'm 24, 23, 24 years old at the time, and I'm like, you know, we had just come back from this experience, and I don't know if that was the reason. I don't know. You never know. I don't know if there was other triggers or this, but that was my first experience with veteran suicide, and we're talking about 1990, in
Yeah.
February 1990. So
And
this is not a new thing.
yeah, what people don't realize is there's so much attention. This month is Men's Mental Health Month, and we have all of these programs and awareness and all of these things. Back when we were dealing with this, when you got out of Panama, when I got out of Desert Storm, it was like, here's your DD 214, have a good day.
Yeah, yeah,
And you weren't prepared for this. I'll tell you one thing though, when you brought up the guitar, it triggered me to remind me of you in the hall room at IUP playing the Eric Clapton song time and time again, trying to lure women in.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But,
I'm still horrible.
yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible. But and I wish we could tell all of the stories, the fun things we did. But what I want to talk about now is, I'm just going to ask you a very pointed question. At what point did you realize you were struggling or had challenges or you had mental health issues or you had to deal with things? Because for me, I truly believe that I manage everything that I have, including a divorce and separation, and that I have been diagnosed with PTSD. and some people say I have anger issues, but I just say I'm from New Jersey. So, I mean, that's kind of, my fallback. But at what point did you kind of embrace that or accept that?
I think there's two answers. Or two questions really. When did I do something about it? And when did I realize it? Or I guess, when did I realize it and when did I do something about it? So, I'm here to say that, my wife, Stacy, you guys known each other. You had a rough beginning, it was always,
Well, you started dating her when she was 12. What can you do, Brian?
yeah. But, I met Stacy, my wife, right after Panama, 1991, right after Desert Storm, really. And, I had, like I said, I'd been drinking a lot. I was putting everything behind me. I think a lot of that's kind of trying to just move on, and they can't. And I remember, vividly, just drinking and getting so intoxicated that I would just break down and cry. I'd break down and talk just about it. Never did it when I was sober. I drank and I would just blah it all out. And Stacy, she was there. She's seen that happen in 1991, and she's always been kind of very supportive. And it's incredibly important that you have a support group behind you. Now, did I think I had a problem at the time? No. I was just, I was 24 years old, 25 years old, partying, and then, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd feel embarrassed about everything, but, you know, and that lasted a long time. Even when in my police career, I would lash out at my kids. I was a yeller. I mean, I would just lose my patience within a second. I could be the best dad in the world, and then just, I lost it. And then there was a funeral, and I remember this is when I kind of realized that maybe there's a problem. I went to a funeral, and there were kids involved, and they were running around the casket area, and like nothing's happening. And it was a good friend of mine that had passed, and I was fine. He was, he was a good guy. I didn't know him well, but we were friends. And we were leaving, and I was walking through a parking lot, and I just broke down and started crying out of like nowhere, to the point where I was hiding behind a car because no one understood what it was. And I've had 3 or 4 instances of that or maybe more than that, but in the last 15 years, and they just suddenly come up. The latest one, again, I'm sitting on the couch talking to my wife, and then all of a sudden I get all hot and flustered, and I just start breaking down and crying. And Stacy, again, she said, you need to go talk to somebody. And I did. I only went to my primary care instructor, and I broke down in front of that guy. I mean, and and again, I haven't gotten counseling yet. I haven't tried to do that. I did go on medication for anxiety, and I tell you what, I was always an anti-medication guy. I'm like, that's for, weak people. Uh, I can definitely tell a difference, and I just wish I did it, God, 20 years ago. Because I have a good relationship with my kids, but I could have been better. You always want to be better than your dad was with you. And my dad was a, hardcore, disciplinarian. I wasn't. I never laid a hand on my kids. Um, but man, did I snap. Like, I would just snap out of nothing, out of nowhere. And so it's been a long road for me. But again, hopefully this is what I'm talking about here, is like, there's guys that have come back from Afghanistan that we're only 10 years, from there, 10 years, 10 to 15, whenever, well, actually 17 when we got out, or whenever that 2020. So, I mean, it took me 34 years,
Yeah.
and that's a
So,
long time.
yeah. And one question I have, I never knew that you were going through any of this.
Because we don't
And
talk to each other that way. That's because it's a pride thing. That's what's wrong with it. You need to talk to your support group, right? You got to talk to your support group. And if that's another vet, that's great. If that's your family, if that's your wife, but I didn't, I was a macho Marine. I wasn't going to tell anybody that I had a problem. I didn't think I had one until, obviously I was like, yeah, maybe I do. So,
I understand that. And, I wish that you had come to me and you spoke to me about some of these things. And, I obviously want to help any of my friends, especially veterans. Part of the reason I'm doing the podcast and wrote the book is because I've seen this, you've experienced it. And if we can help people get over the stigma of, being afraid or being too macho. And for us, our friendship, look at our fathers when they show up to IUP and they're raw, their chests come out and their bellies get sucked in, they're shaking hands. And I think our childhoods were similar in some ways.
yeah, they were pretty interesting, to say the least.
But, for me now, um, I'll just kind of share with you. I mean, I haven't told you this. I haven't told anybody this. When I went through the custody and lost custody of my kids, it's probably the darkest period of my life. And you knew what happened to me in Desert Storm between Mike and Ashley and all that. And I'll talk about that in the
Yeah.
podcast later on, which was what anybody, if they went through that, they would, think that was probably the most terrible thing in the world that someone can experience. But when I lost custody of the kids, it was like 2 days after the trial. And, I it's almost embarrassing to talk about, like, wanting to commit suicide or thoughts of suicide. And I called the veterans hotline, and I just wanted somebody to talk to. Once again, you go through your thing, you don't call me. I go through my thing, I don't call you. I don't know why. But I get on the hotline, and after like fucking 5 minutes, I was just like, this is a waste of my time. There was no value. And it was just like, suck it up, get back in the fight, do what you got to do, and move on. So for me, I didn't submit my claim for PTSD until, almost 12 years after you're retiring. So I understand that. But I mean, it's just, for me, it's really hard to reach out to you, a friend I've had for 30 something years, and tell you that, I'm weak, I need help,
Right.
and things like
Yep.
that. So I'm glad that, we talked about this just briefly a couple of weeks ago, but, uh, you know, I want my message, I want this podcast to resonate with people. We have gone through and experienced things that, most friendships will never do. I mean, never experience. And between us, we have a hard time communicating our thoughts, and, don't want to look at being weak. I still have the story you're going to tell about when I'm running to save the little kid. He gets out of the water and his
I wasn't going to bring it up, Jim. I wasn't going to bring it up.
That's okay. I wasn't going to bring up the bar fight in North Carolina, or I wasn't going to bring up brown sugar
That
either.
guy
So,
deserved that car door.
yeah. But so tell me from your experience, with regard to losing friends, and struggling with your own issues, and then accepting them, and then dealing with it. I mean, where do we go from here? Where where do you want to go? And I mean, you, by all stretches of imagination, you have very successful, life and family and marriage and children. You should be proud of them. I watched your Facebook post. But what do you want to go on? How do you want to move forward? What's your legacy? What's your thoughts on this? And what's your message to other veterans?
Well, it's funny, you talk about PTSD, and I'm not diagnosed with PTSD. I'm not a psychiatrist, but if you most vets that have gone through, situations that, you or I have, a lot of them, it's functional PTSD, they call it, where you can live a normal life, but you still have those episodes, like, like the crying fits or whatnot. those anxiety events where, and again, medication is great for this, and it's really helped me. But there's still things that you can just do a Google search anytime you want. What veterans anxiety and what are the symptoms? And I still have symptoms. Like, I don't want to be anywhere near anybody, like crowds. And Stacy, my wife, will tell you, if we're going somewhere and there's a crowd, I get, and I'm not a claustrophobic guy, never was, but since the Marine Corps, I don't want to be surrounded by people that close. I need to, it gets me anxious, you know. I love my loneliness. And it's not that I don't love my family, but I'll go hiking, and you know this, I go a long distance hiking. I'll leave and do a 300-mile on the Appalachian Trail, and I'm in my element. And it's not that I don't want to be with my family. I'm with my thoughts. So getting back to what do I want to improve, or what do I hope for the future for me, is not that I can go out and enjoy my life a little bit more than I did in the last 30 years, where I didn't want to be in crowds. I can't hear. I mean, obviously that's that's just that's just par for the course for an infantry guy. So I can't hear. So I go to bars, and you're yelling and screaming, people are talking. I can't hear. I can't enjoy that conversation. A little bit of that is age too, and it's getting worse. But I want to be able to go out and not have to worry about the crowds. I want to be able to go out and have fun and smile. I want to be able to know that if my kid does something wrong, I'm not going to snap at him, and I don't. And now my kids are older now, but that's what I want. I want to be I want to be a better dad, and sometimes I fall real short of that, and I can't blame, I don't blame the military on that at all. I mean, but not all of it, but obviously, you know, your military experience and what you do, and that does have definite, there's a definite correlation on how you progress through your life. Some people are awesome. I mean, they've been in situations that you're like, what? And they're normal. Their brains are wired. Most guys aren't. Most vets aren't. Your regular infantrymen. I watch podcasts. Some of these guys, these gunslingers, and they absolutely love it. And you're talking. I'm sitting there going, either they're BSing or they really do love it. So there's a different breed out there.
Yeah,
I'm,
I would say there certainly is. I've seen it, being in the special forces community, and the testosterone levels are tenfold in that community compared to the infantry. Uh, but no, I appreciate that. Here's another question for you, and I think we touched on it briefly in a conversation. Do you believe that you have any type of survivor's guilt from your time
yeah,
in Panama, or seeing me and others in Desert Storm and not going there? And
yeah,
for me, you asked me that pointed question, last week, and I
yeah.
thought about because of what happened, in Desert Storm with me. But I really want to understand what your thoughts are on if you have any of that.
So that came about 3 or 4 years ago. I was at a conference for my new job. So I'm a retired cop. Now I work for a company that trains cops all over the country. So I was at a conference in Wisconsin, and most vets, or most cops are prior vets, right? So I ended up hanging out. We were at a bar with a Marine, came back from Iraq, and he'd done a couple tours in Iraq, and we got to drinking. And 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and we're back. We're just hanging out in the lobby, and we got like a 6 pack or whatever, and we're drinking. And he's telling me stories, and we're kind of swapping stories about the Marine Corps, funny stuff, dumb, stupid stuff that we did as Marines, crayon eating idiots, So, we would, we were just talking about dumb stuff like that. And then it got serious. And he started bringing up stuff that, I could tell right there he was having a tough time. Because even, again, drinking brings out that that conversation, right? And he went down a dark path, and then I ended up going down my dark path. So you've got two dumb jarheads in the lobby of a hotel that are like sobbing like dummies. And he said something to me, and dude, you got survivor's guilt. And I had never, what the hell's that? And he goes, you have survivor's guilt. He goes, you came home and others didn't. And it was just that simple. He goes, you ended up being surrounded by chaos, right? But you came home without a scratch where others didn't. And there was a lot of, and if I think back, there were a lot of civilian casualties in that operation that I to this day, deal like that's what really haunts me. But he now I'm like, he might be right. So what I do the next morning or the 2 days after I actually recovered, because it took me 2 days to recover at my age from that, I Googled survivor's guilt, and I was like, holy crap. So it was like, and it had a lot of stuff with anxiety, avoidance, not wanting to be in the crowds. A lot of things started connecting the dots. And again, we're talking 34 years removed. Okay, 30 something years removed, 1989 to now. And that was 3 years ago. And that's why I asked you before, when did I realize it and what did I do about it? So I really have only done anything about it 3 years ago. And again, it came down to sitting on the couch, and it was shortly after the conference, after I talked to this guy. And again, it was bringing up all these memories. I think that's what triggered me, just breaking down and crying in front of Stacy for no reason. And that was when I was like, okay. I went to my doctor, and I talked to him, and he goes, again, we're Marines, but I don't need, I'm a tough guy. I don't need medication. I don't need that. And I'll be honest with you, it's probably been the best thing for me. It really leveled me out. Now, do I still get angry? Yeah, but I don't, for some reason, I don't just snap and fly off the handle. I just take a deep breath, and I just, okay. And I move on. And I find that's better because, in 10 minutes, everything's fine anyway, you know? So
I
again,
wish I could say the same for, my situation.
I know, and your situation breaks my heart, Jim. It really does. I mean, I can't imagine being separated from your children. And I remember when we first talked about this years, it's been a few years, I guess, at least two.
Almost
Yeah,
three.
yeah, right around the same time I went. Yeah, but it's and I told you, I remember you were telling me that you're going to court, and I was like, because as a cop, I deal with this every day. I did every day when I was on the street, some sort of custody battle. And right off the bat, you know who the victims are, the kids, right? The kids are the victims of this, and they're used as a tug of war between parents. And the system is always levied towards the female. Always. Doesn't matter. But well, that's the mom. It's got to go to the mom. Like, okay, but what if the mom is not? And I've been there. I've seen moms that they don't want to be moms. They want to go out to the club and drink, and the dad's like, and I'm not saying that that's your situation. I don't know enough about what happened between you, and that's fine. But I've seen the situation almost daily, and it's heartbreaking for the kids, for the family. And again, I feel for you, man. I wish there was something I could do, but
Well, we talked about that contingency plan, but they don't fly like that anymore. So,
oh, boy.
Brian, listen, I honestly, you being the first guest on my podcast is, meant, it means a lot. Having the ability to open up and talk about these topics is obviously during, this kind of period in our society where, feminism is, taken hold, and masculinity and all of this stuff is under attack. And being vulnerable and talking about issues and being open and honest. Obviously, you open yourself up to criticism. For me, doing the podcast, writing the book was my way of opening up, and being able to talk about, the things that I struggle with. Obviously, you talking about the things you're struggling with or struggle with or dealt with in your life, obviously that takes a lot of strength and resilience to talk about it. And I really do appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking about that. And I'll
Yeah.
let you finish up. I want you to tell me kind of, what your thoughts are. If you want to have a message for anyone or,
Yeah. Yeah.
go ahead and
I,
just fire
I
away.
want, I want vets to me, if I want vets to talk to other vets like me and you are talking. Now we're putting it out there for whoever wants to watch it. Um, but I think the fact that we talk this way now openly, with putting the testosterone in the back pocket for a while, in that macho-ness and really talking about, hey, how are you feeling? What's up? Because we talked, as a matter of fact, we talked about it just recently, really like a few hours ago before the podcast, even real quick phone call, getting ready, but we talked about that meme on TikTok, I think it was, and
Yeah.
where we had the two soccer player fans in the stadium, right? One of them was really happy all the time. The other guy looked like he was distraught, and when you're watching this video, you're like, this guy is really depressed and this guy's really happy. And in the end of that video, who's only one of them shows up, and it was the guy that you thought was depressed. And obviously what was trying to be displayed here was that he had taken his life, the guy that was outgoing. So you don't know, what your other guys are feeling. You don't know what they've gone through. Even if you were there with them, if you're a vet in the same unit and one guy, hey, I'm fine, I'm fine. You may not be. And again, it's so hard. Like I said, I know 3 people that committed suicide. One of them was my roommate in the police department, and yeah, he just all of a sudden, took his life. Now he wasn't in the military, but police work and that camaraderie and that adrenaline rush and that danger, I guess, on occasion is there. Now, I'm not saying Pete didn't have other issues that drew him to it. I'm not saying that it was police work. Again, I can't even see Danny House what the reason was. But I can tell you that when you got 17 to 22 killing themselves every day, there's an issue. So my message again, and the only thing I really wanted, hopefully we got out of this, some funny stories and all that, but and there's a lot more that we didn't touch on. But the what I hope to get out of this and hope your viewers get out of this is that, take care of each other, especially if we got vets listening. You may be experiencing the same thing I did or you did, Jem, and they haven't had the opportunity to do what we're doing right now. So talk to your vets, talk to your buddies, reach out to them. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? And just be there for them. So that's it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate that, Brian. And I think, if you need anything, you can always call me and, I'll be there in 4.5 hours. You know how I
Yeah.
drive. So it may be 4 hours and 10 minutes.
Well, yeah, but it'll take you 2 hours to return my phone call because you're like my wife. She doesn't turn the ringer on, I don't think.
Listen,
But anyway, Jim,
Brian,
thank you very much for having me. Again, I love what you're doing with this podcast. I think I'm hoping it's obviously been successful for you mentally, right? It's as good therapeutic for you as it is for your audience and for me, really, quite honestly. So I haven't opened up like this, I don't know, ever, and we only touched
I'm
the
glad you
surface
did.
of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm glad you did. And once again, I appreciate it. At every milestone in my life, you have been a part of it and you continue to be a part of it. And I do appreciate that. And I'm very fortunate that I have lifelong friendships and you're one of them. And thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Jim. Take care.
All right. Tell Stacy I said hi. Don't
I will.
tell her not to hate me too much.
I will. She loves you now.
Okay, great. All right. Have a good one, Brian. Thanks again.
Take care. All right.
Bye.